Bismarck Sea, north of New Guinea, 0417, March 2nd, 1943. The pre-dawn air was thick enough to chew. It was a hot, wet blanket of salt and diesel fumes. On the open bridge of the MV Crate, a rust-streaked 5,000-ton freighter, Third Officer Michael Sloan stared into the blackness. His shirt was plastered to his back, not from the heat, but from the tension that had been coiling in his stomach for 3 days. They were part of Convoy codenamed Operation Lilliput. 12 ships, 12 slow, fat targets filled with ammunition, fuel, and, most precious of all, soldiers of the Australian 7th Division, veterans of the desert, now redeployed to stop the Japanese advance in New Guinea. "Movement, port bow," the forward lookout called, his voice barely a croak. Sloan raised his binoculars, his knuckles white. Nothing, just the dark, oily swell of the sea. The Crate was making 8 knots, her old steam turbine thrumming a low, funereal beat. The destroyer escorts, HMS Warramunga and Arunta, were shadows, ghosts hunting ghosts. There, again. This time he saw it, a flicker, a low shape against the fractionally lighter horizon. Then another, and another. "Action stations! Action stations!" Sloan slammed the alarm bell, the clang, 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 slicing through the humid night. "Signal the flagship. Multiple contacts, port." The response was instant, not from his ship, but from the sea. White streaks, impossibly fast, laced the water. "Torpedoes!" the lookout screamed. "Torpedoes in the water!" Sloan gripped the railing, a useless reflex. There was no time to turn. The Crate was a lame cow in a wolf pack. He watched one phosphorescent trail arrow straight for the ship just ahead of them, the MV Tasman. The world dissolved in fire. A column of water, steam, and orange flame erupted from the Tasman's side. The sound followed a second later, a deep, gut-punching whump that Sloan felt in his teeth. The Tasman was hit badly, her back broken. She was already listing, her whistle screaming a continuous, agonizing blast. Then it was their turn. A jolt threw Sloan against the bulkhead, not a torpedo, a different kind of impact. "Zeros! They're strafing!" The night air was suddenly filled with the angry hornet buzz of 7mm machine guns and the heavier thud-thud-thud of 20mm cannon. Green and red tracer rounds stitched across the Crate's deck, turning men into red mist. The ship's only defense, a single ancient Lewis gun mounted on the stern, fired a pathetic handful of rounds before being silenced. A man nearby, a digger from the 214th Battalion, was clutching his throat, a look of shocked surprise on his face as he slumped to the deck. "They're lining up for the bombers," the captain yelled. Sloan looked up. High above, he heard the drone. A new sound, the unsynchronized rumble of Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers. They were methodical. They had found the convoy. The destroyers were busy hunting the submarines and fending off the strafers. The freighters were naked. The first stick of bombs whistled down. The noise was a primal tear in the fabric of the sky. Sloan didn't even have time to pray. The Crate bucked like a living thing, struck by a hammer blow from the gods. Steel screamed. The deck plates beneath him jumped and a wave of pure, searing heat washed over the bridge. He was thrown, weightless, into the darkness. His last thought was not of home or of his family. It was a single, burning, frustrated realization. We can't even fight back. We're just meat. Allied Headquarters, Brisbane, Australia. March 10th, 1943. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea was over. It was a catastrophe. In a sterile briefing room, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of stale coffee, the numbers were laid bare on a chalkboard. Convoy Lilliput, final tally. 8 troop transports, lost 4 destroyers, 1 lost, 2 damaged est, 3,000 plus personnel, 7th Division. Lost General Sir Thomas Blamey, commander of Allied land forces, stared at the board, his face a mask of cold fury. The 7th Division men lost were irreplaceable veterans. They weren't just numbers. They were the heart of his army, and they had been slaughtered without firing a shot in their own defense. They never made it to Leh, an operations officer said, his voice hollow. The Japanese air assets from Rabaul. They treated it like a training exercise. This was the central agonizing problem of the Southwest Pacific area, the Kokoda track of the sea. The war in New Guinea was a war of supply. The island was a fortress of jungle, mountain, and disease. You couldn't live off the land. Every bullet, every tin of bully beef, every bandage, and every soldier had to be shipped in, primarily from Australian ports like Townsville and Cairns. The Japanese knew this. Their entire strategy, orchestrated from the massive, heavily fortified base at Rabaul, was simple. Interdict, isolate, and annihilate. Cut the supply artery, and the Allied armies in New Guinea would wither and die on the vine. And the artery was sickeningly soft. The convoys were a tragic joke. They weren't the grand armadas of the Atlantic, bristling with carrier groups and destroyer screens. They were a pathetic collection of rust buckets, aging Dutch freighters, coastal steamers, and requisitioned island traders. Their top speed was often 8, maybe 9 knots. A fit man could jog faster. They were sailing into the most dangerous waters in the world, an area the Japanese pilots called the easy hunting ground. A single Japanese airbase at Rabaul held hundreds of the Imperial Japanese Navy's most elite pilots, veterans of China, Pearl Harbor, and the sinking of the Prince of Wales. To them, a slow-moving freighter was target practice. The Allied response was tactically bankrupt. Standard convoy doctrine called for dispersal when attacked by air, scattering the ships to make them harder targets. In the open ocean, against the speed and precision of Japanese naval aircraft, this simply meant they were picked off one by one, isolated from the meager protection of their escorts. The freighters themselves were virtually unarmed. They were civilian ships. They might carry a single 20mm Oerlikon or an old Vickers machine gun, often manned by a digger passenger who'd had a 5-minute lesson on how to use it. The result was a one-sided slaughter. Ship after ship, man after man vanished into the Coral and Bismarck seas. Morale among the merchant sailors was abysmal. Morale among the soldiers being transported on these death ships was even worse. "Gentlemen," Blamey said, his voice dangerously quiet, "we are not losing a war of combat. We are losing a war of logistics. The Japanese are sinking our supplies faster than we can load them. If we cannot solve this, if we cannot get our men and our kit to New Guinea, this campaign is over. We will be pushed back to the shores of Australia. Find me an answer. I don't care what it is. Just find it." The room was silent. There was no answer. Coral Sea, approaches to Milne Bay. 1422, April 18th, 1943. The siren on the MV Guinea began its high, thin wail. "Air raid, air raid, bandits, 10 o'clock high." On the port bridge wing, Lieutenant David Davo Keenan of the Royal Australian Navy Volunteer Reserve, Ranvar, shielded his eyes against the blinding tropical sun. He was a passenger, an observer sent from the logistics office in Townsville to assess convoy vulnerabilities. He felt like a doctor sent to assess a man who had already been shot. "There they are," the captain muttered, pointing. Keenan saw them. 9. No. 12 silver specks, impossibly high, glinting in the sun. They were Mitsubishi G4M Bettys, heavy bombers. "Right," the captain grunted, ringing the engine room. "Full speed. Begin evasive maneuvers." The Gundawindi shuddered as her engine strained, pushing her to a churning 10 knots. She began a slow, ponderous turn to starboard. Keenan watched as the other 4 ships in the tiny convoy did the same, splitting apart like a startled flock of ducks. "Standard dispersal," Keenan said to himself. "It won't work." He watched the bombers. They didn't dive. They were too high, too smart. They simply separated into 3 precise formations of 4, each one picking a single isolated freighter. "They're bracketing us," the captain said. His knuckles were white on the wheel. Keenan felt the helplessness again, the same cold dread from the reports. He ran to the stern, where 2 Army privates were wrestling with the canvas cover on a .50 caliber machine gun. "Get it firing, lads!" Keenan yelled. "Bloody thing's jammed, sir!" one of them shouted back, his face slick with sweat and grease. "The salt! It seized the belt feed!" Keenan looked up. The sky directly above them was empty. He could hear the faint, high whistle. It was a sound that didn't seem to belong to the bright, beautiful day. "Get down!" he screamed, tackling the 2 soldiers. The first bomb struck the water 100 yards off the port bow, sending up a geyser of white water that rained down on the deck. The second was 50 yards off the starboard beam. The Gundawindi was precisely bracketed. The third bomb was a direct hit. It struck just aft of the bridge, penetrating 2 decks before exploding in the number 3 hold, which was packed with 25-pounder artillery shells. The Gundawindi did not sink. She evaporated. The explosion was absolute. A flash of white-hot light, a deafening crack, and the ship was simply gone, replaced by a towering column of black smoke, debris, and steam. Keenan, blown clear by the blast, found himself in the warm, oily water, his ears ringing, his lungs aching. He surfaced, spitting brine, and stared at the spot where his ship had been. There was nothing, just wreckage, oil, and bodies. The air smelled of cordite and burning paint. He grabbed a floating crate. Across the water, he could see another of the Convoy's ships, the MV Aurora, burning fiercely, her crew already taking to the lifeboats. The Japanese bombers, their work done, were already banking, heading back to Rabaul. Not a single shot had been fired at them with any effect. He was picked up hours later by the escort corvette, HMAS Wollongong. The ship's deck was crowded with other survivors, burned, wounded, and in shock. Keenan sat, wrapped in a blanket, shivering despite the heat. The Wollongong's captain, a grim-faced lieutenant commander, handed him a mug of tea. "Third convoy this month, Lieutenant. Same result. We never even scratch 'em. They're too high," Keenan said, his voice raw. "And we're too slow. And too bloody naked," the captain added. These things, they're not ships. They're coffins. And the Japs know it. They come in, take their time, drop their loads, and fly home for a medal. It's routine." Keenan looked at the survivors. The wounded diggers, the merchant sailors, their eyes dead. Routine failure, routine death. He took a sip of the scalding tea. "No," he said so quietly the captain barely heard him. "Not anymore. It can't be. Townsville Docks, Queensland, Australia. 0811, May 3rd, 1943. Lieutenant David Keenan was not a sailor. Not really. He was Ran VR, a Choco, chocolate soldier or reservist, a man who had joined up out of duty, not passion. Before the war, he wasn't charting courses. He was managing the Taldora sugar mill near Bundaberg. He was a man of turbines, gears, welding torches, and agricultural machinery. He understood leverage, steel fatigue, and how to fix a 10-ton harvester with a spanner and a piece of fencing wire. The Navy, in its infinite wisdom, had seen engineer on his file and assigned him to shoreside logistics. He was supposed to be managing cargo manifests. But after the Gundawindi, he had become a man possessed by a single furious idea. He stood on the dock, watching them load the MV Burdekin. She was another rust bucket, destined for Moresby. On her deck, soldiers were lashing down jeeps. He watched a jeep being lifted. It had a .30 caliber machine gun on a pintle mount. Simple, flexible. Then he watched an army crew servicing a Bren gun carrier. It had a mount for a Vickers machine gun. He looked at the vast, empty steel deck of the Burdekin. It was a blank canvas of vulnerability. "The problem isn't the Japs," he muttered to himself. "The problem is us. We're presenting a target." He walked over to an army sergeant supervising the loading of ammunition. "Sarge, that Vickers," Keenan said, pointing to a spare gun being crated. "What's its effective range against aircraft?" The sergeant, a grizzled man with Africa Star ribbons, shrugged. "Maybe 800 yards, sir, if you're lucky. Not enough stopping power. A Zer'll fly right through it." "Right," Keenan said. "But what if it wasn't one? What if it was 4 or 6, all firing at the same spot, at the same time?" The sergeant paused. "Well, that's a different story, innit? That's a wall of lead. Nothing's flying through that." Keenan's mind, the mill manager's mind, started to turn. He wasn't thinking like a naval architect, bound by admiralty regulations and blueprints. He was thinking like a farmer. When you have a dingo problem, you don't use one trap. You build a fence. You make the cost of entry too high. He grabbed a piece of chalk from a loading foreman and walked over to a large steel plate lying on the dock. "Chief," he yelled to a nearby chief petty officer. "You, the one with the welder, come here." The CPO, a salty veteran named Brody, ambled over, wiping his hands on a rag. "Sir?" Keenan knelt and began to draw, his hand moving fast. It wasn't a blueprint, it was a sketch, a heavy base plate scavenged from scrap, a central reinforced pivot, maybe from a truck's steering column, and branching off it, 4 simple, rugged arms. "We take 4 Vickers guns," Keenan explained, his voice gaining speed. "We mount them here, 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 and here. We link the trigger mechanisms to a single spade grip, like on a 50 cal. We use salvaged naval optics, or even just a simple ring sight. We bolt the whole bloody thing to the deck, here and here." Chief Brody stared at the drawing. He'd seen officers with bright ideas before. Most of them were rubbish. But this, "It's crude, sir," Brody said, scratching his chin. "The recoil would be a nightmare. It'd shake itself to bits. So we add weight," Keenan said, chalking a thicker base. "We brace it. We use heavy-duty springs to dampen it. We're not building a watch, Chief. We're building a sledgehammer. The Japs are flying low. They're coming in at 500 feet to drop torpedoes and strafe. We don't need to be accurate. We just need to fill a 50-foot patch of sky with so much metal they can't get through it." Brody looked at the drawing, then at the ship, then back at Keenan. He saw the logic. It wasn't about sinking a ship, it was about defending one. "The Yanks have their quad 50s on their battleships," Brody said. This is a digger's version." "Exactly," Keenan said. "And we can build it today, with scrap. We don't need a shipyard, we just need a welder and a will." Brody slowly nodded. "A dingo mount, eh? Looks scrappy, but it might just bite." The spark was lit. It wasn't a product of naval doctrine, it was a product of agricultural engineering and desperate frontline improvisation. Naval Operations, Townsville, 1530, May 4th, 1943. The office of Commander Davies, Royal Navy, was an island of British order in a sea of Australian chaos. Polished mahogany desk, framed photo of the king. The air was cool, smelling faintly of floor wax and pipe tobacco. Keenan stood at attention, his chalk-stained drawing clutched in his hand. Chief Brody stood just behind him, cap in hand, looking uncomfortable. Davies, a man whose crisp white uniform had never seen a speck of grease, looked at the sketch with undisguised contempt. "A dingo mount, Lieutenant? Is that what you're calling this contraption?" "Yes, sir," Keenan said. "It's a field-expedient heavy anti-aircraft mount. We can build them from salvage. 4 Vickers guns, linked fire. We can put 6 of them on a standard freighter in 48 hours." Davies tapped the drawing with a manicured fingernail. "Lieutenant Keenan, you are a reserve officer, a mill manager, I believe. You are not a naval architect. You are not an ordnance engineer. Sir, I know how steel works, and I know what you know, Lieutenant." Davies cut him off. "Is irrelevant. This thing is a monstrosity. It's not to Admiralty standard. The recoil would tear the deck plates. The weight would affect the ship's stability. And where, pray tell, do you intend to find an endless supply of Vickers machine guns? The Army is screaming for them as it is. We can use guns from damaged aircraft, from wrecked carriers, from anywhere," Keenan argued, his own frustration rising. "Sir, Admiralty standard is sinking to the bottom of the Coral Sea. We lost the Guinea because her crew couldn't fight back. This lets them fight back. We have protocols for upgunning vessels, Lieutenant," Davies said coldly. "It involves a proper refit in a dry dock. We install single-mount 20mm Oerlikons or 40mm Bofors when they become available, which takes 6 weeks." Keenan's voice rose, a breach of protocol. "We don't have 6 weeks. We're losing ships now." Davies stood up. "Your enthusiasm is noted. Your creativity is also noted. But you are in the Navy now, Mr. Keenan, not a Queensland junkyard. We will not be bolting scrap metal to His Majesty's vessels. Your proposal is denied. Go back to your manifests. That is all." Keenan's face was white. He and Brody stood frozen. "Denied." "Sir," Chief Brody spoke up, his voice a low rumble. Davies turned. "Yes, Chief." "With respect, Commander." "You're wrong," Brody said. The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. "The standard ain't working. The lads know it. The diggers going up to Moresby, they know it. They call them death ships. Morale is shot. This idea, it's rough, but it's something. It's an Aussie solution, and it'll work. Davies's face purpled. You are bordering on insubordination, Chief Petty Officer. I'm stating a fact, sir, Brody said, unflinching. If we do nothing, we keep losing. If we try this, we might have a chance, a digger's chance. Before Davies could have them both arrested, a third voice joined the conversation. I'll take 'em. All three men turned. Leaning in the doorway was an Australian Army colonel, Colonel Shrapnel Malone, commander of the Shore Battalion, a man whose face looked like a poorly mapped road. Colonel, Davies said stiffly, a private naval matter. Not when it's my men and my bullets you're sinking, Commander, Malone growled, stepping into the room. He picked up Keenan's drawing. I don't know ships, but I know guns. And I like this. I like it a lot. He looked at Keenan. Can you build it? Yes, sir, Keenan said, his heart pounding. Can you get the guns? I know where a dozen wrecked Bren carriers are, sir. The mounts are salvageable. Malone tossed the drawing back on Davies's desk. Good. My men are loading the MV Rockhampton on Friday. That's 4 days. I want 2 of these dingo things on it. Consider it an Army matter. You, he pointed to Keenan. Report to me. You, he pointed to Brody. Find a welder. As for you, Commander, thank you for your time. Malone turned and walked out. Keenan and Brody shared a look. It was a look of pure, terrified triumph. Well, Brody muttered, putting on his cap. Let's go find some scrap, sir. Townsville Salvage Yard, the Boneyard, 0619, May 5th, 1943. The Boneyard was a sprawling, humid graveyard of good intentions. Rusted truck chassis, skeletons of wrecked aircraft, and pyramids of spent shell casings baked under the relentless Queensland sun. The air stank of rust, mud, and welding fumes. Keenan, Brody, and a hand-picked team of 4, 2 Army mechanics and 2 naval artificers, looked like thieves dividing their loot. They had a flatbed truck and Colonel Malone's signature on a requisition form that gave them carte blanche. Right, Keenan said, rolling up his sleeves. His officer's shirt was already black with sweat. Brody, you and Smithy start on the base plates. I saw a 1/2-inch steel plate from a damaged tanker over by the fence. Get the torch. Make it heavy. Aye, sir. What about the pivots? Thompson, O'Leary? Keenan pointed to the Army mechanics. Those 2 wrecked Stuart tanks. I want the turret rings. If you can't get the rings, I want the gearbox. We need something that can turn 360 degrees, smooth, under a heavy load. For the next 72 hours, they didn't sleep. They worked under floodlights, fueled by black tea and sheer, stubborn willpower. The build was a symphony of brute force and delicate improvisation. The sound was a constant metallic scream. The shriek of the angle grinder cutting the heavy plate, the thud, thud, thud of a sledgehammer convincing a warped turret ring to sit flat. And over it all, the sharp electric hiss of Brody's welding torch, stitching the pieces together. The smell was of ozone, burning paint, and hot metal. It's not lining up, Thompson yelled, battling the trigger linkage. They were trying to get all 4 salvaged Vickers guns to fire from a single spade grip. The pull is different on all of them. Forget the mechanical link, Keenan yelled back, wiping grease from his face. It's too complex. We'll use solenoids. Rip them out of the starters from those wrecked Jeeps. We'll wire all 4 to a car battery and a single thumb switch. Make it electric. It was a classic Bush mechanic solution, crude but effective. They built the splinter shields from the armored cab of a blown-up White Scout car, welding the plates around the gunner's station. It wouldn't stop a 20mm cannon shell, but it would stop the deadly rain of shrapnel and strafing bullets. By dawn on the 3rd day, 2 of the contraptions stood on the dock. They were hideous. They were squat, ugly, and angular, covered in sloppy welds and painted a hurried, streaky naval gray. They looked less like a weapon and more like a piece of abstract sculpture. Each one had 4 303 Vickers guns pointing menacingly at the sky, their ammunition boxes, scavenged and modified, holding 250 round belts. Colonel Malone arrived, chewing on an unlit cigar. He walked a slow circle around the first dingo mount. It's the ugliest bloody thing I've ever seen, he said. She's beautiful, sir. Brody grinned, his face a mask of soot. Does it work? Only one way to find out, sir, Keenan said. They winched the two mounts, each weighing the better part of a ton, onto the deck of the MV Rockhampton. One forward of the bridge, one on the aft cargo hatch. They welded the base plates directly to the deck, reinforcing the support beams below with railway sleepers. As the welders finished, a young digger, a private from an anti-aircraft unit, was assigned to test fire the weapon. He climbed into the steel bucket seat, looked at the tangle of wires, the car battery, and the 4 guns, and then looked at Keenan. "You sure about this, sir?" "Just point it at the sky and press the button, son," Keenan said, his heart in his throat. Off Magnetic Island, Queensland. 14 May 7th, 1943. The MV Rockhampton steamed into the bay, her holds empty. This was the test. On the bridge, Commander Davies stood with rigid disapproval, binoculars to his eyes. Colonel Malone was next to him, grinning. Keenan was on the deck, standing near the forward dingo mount. "Test platform," Davies muttered. "Let's see this abomination shake itself apart, and the ship with it." "Wirraway is on station," the radio operator called. The plan was simple. An RAF Wirraway, a local training plane, would fly over at 1,000 feet. No target tow. This was just a function test. "Forward mount load," Keenan ordered. The young gunner, Private Harris, snapped the ammunition belts into the 4 Vickers. He chambered the rounds, took hold of the spade grips, and sighted on the empty sky. "Wirraway approaching 5,000 yards, the radio squawked. "All right, son," Keenan said, patting the steel shield. "Give it a 5-second burst, into the sky, not at the plane." "Aye, sir." Keenan shoved wads of cotton into his ears and signaled to the bridge. Malone gave a sharp nod. "Forward mount. Engage." Harris thumbed the electric trigger. The result was not a pop, pop, pop. It was an explosion. It was an apocalypse of sound. The 4 guns, slightly out of sync, hammered the air with a combined rate of fire of 2,000 rounds per minute. It was a deafening, canvas-tearing roar that shook the entire ship. Spent cartridges rained onto the deck in a brass torrent. A 4-foot-long spear of white-hot flame erupted from the muzzles. The mount itself, weighed down by steel and hope, shuddered violently but held its place, the pivot turning smoothly as Harris tracked. On the bridge, Commander Davies's teacup, sitting on a tray, rattled off and shattered on the deck. His jaw had dropped. After 5 seconds, Harris let go. The sudden silence was as shocking as the noise. A cloud of acrid cordite smoke drifted across the deck, stinging their eyes and noses. "Bloody hell," Harris whispered, his ears ringing, a massive shell-shocked grin spreading across his face. The radio operator, stunned, held his earpiece. "Sir, it's the Wirraway pilot. He says, what in God's name was that? My entire aircraft is vibrating. It sounded like the end of the world." Malone took the radio. "That, son, was the sound of a fair go. Head back to base." He turned to Davies. Commander Davies was pale. He was slowly, methodically picking up the broken pieces of his teacup. He didn't look at Malone. He looked at Keenan. You've deafened us all, Lieutenant." "Sir?" Davies straightened up, brushing porcelain dust from his white shorts. "The recoil didn't tear the deck. The ship is stable. The test is a success." He paused, a man recalculating his entire world. "Chief Brody, get your welders. I want 4 more of these things on this ship before she sails tonight, and find a way to quiet them down." "Can't quiet them, sir," Brody beamed, "but we can sure as hell build them." Malone clapped Keenan on the shoulder. "Son, I think you just built the first Aussie battleship." The slot, Solomon C., 1147, May 15th, 1943. Convoy, Operation Moresby 9, was in hell. The MV Rockhampton was at the center of a 5-ship convoy, zigzagging desperately. They were 100 miles from their destination, and Raboul had come out to meet them. "Bandits, 11 o'clock. They're coming in low." This wasn't a high-level bombing run. This was a torpedo and strafing attack. The worst kind. 18 Japanese Kate torpedo bombers and Val dive bombers, escorted by a swarm of A6M-0s, were peeling off from the main formation. They were confident, almost arrogant. They had seen these freighters before. Easy kills. On the Rockhampton's deck, the mood was different. The ship now bristled with 6 dingo mounts, 3 per side. Manning them were not sailors, but digger passengers from the 2/3 Anti-Aircraft Regiment. They were men who knew guns, and they were furious. Keenan, who had volunteered to supervise the mounts on this first run, was at the aft starboard mount with Private Harris. "Hold your fire. Hold it," Keenan breathed, tracking the first Zero as it screamed in for a strafing run, its 20mm cannons winking. The pilot was coming straight at them, expecting nothing but a few rifle shots. "Let him get close! Let him get cocky!" The Zero was at 800 yards, then 600. Tracers from its wings were ripping up the water just ahead of them. "Now!" Keenan bellowed. "Hit him!" Harris jammed his thumb on the trigger. The dingo mount erupted. A solid 4-gun stream of .303 tracer, 1 in every 5 rounds, lanced out and struck the plane. It wasn't a hit. It was a collision. The wall of lead, 2,000 rounds per minute, struck the Zero's engine block. The plane didn't explode or spiral gracefully. It disintegrated. The engine tore itself from the airframe, the wings snapped off, and the fuselage, shredded to confetti, vanished in a spray of oil and flame. The Japanese pilot, a second before a deadly ace, ceased to exist. "Next!" Harris screamed, his blood up, already swinging the heavy mount toward a Val dive bomber pulling up from a failed drop. All along the Rockhampton's deck, the other 5 mounts opened up. The sky, which seconds before had been the sole property of the Japanese, was suddenly terrifyingly full. It was crisscrossed with webs of red tracer. The sound was a continuous, deafening roar that drowned out the plane's engines. The Japanese pilots had flown into a buzzsaw. A Kate torpedo bomber, leveling off for its run on the Convoy's lead ship, was targeted by 3 dingo mounts at once. The combined fire, 6,000 rounds per minute, sawed the plane in half. The torpedo, dropped in panic, skipped harmlessly across the waves. A Zero, trying to strafe the Rockhampton's bridge, was struck by the forward mount. Its wing was torn off, and it cartwheeled into the sea, exploding on impact. The effect on the Japanese was pure, unadulterated panic. These were not sheep. These were porcupines. They were fighting back. The attack, which should have been a 15-minute slaughter, dissolved into a frantic melee. The Japanese pilots broke formation. Their precise attacks became wild, desperate attempts to escape the flak trap. They dropped their bombs and torpedoes wide, anywhere, just to get out of the lethal range of these things. After 5 minutes, it was over. The surviving Japanese planes, many of them damaged, fled for Rabaul. Behind them, they left 5 of their number burning on the water. The MV Rockhampton was untouched. One other ship in the convoy had minor damage from a near miss, but the convoy was intact. Keenan leaned against the hot steel of the dingo's shield, his ears ringing, his hands shaking. Private Harris was laughing, a high, unhinged sound of pure adrenaline. On the bridge, the captain, a grizzled merchant sailor, picked up the voice pipe. "Engine room? Full steam ahead. We've got a schedule to keep." He looked at the smoking patch of water where a Zero had been. "Well, I'll be damned. Townsville, Brisbane, and Cairns docks, June-August 1943. The Rockhampton's after-action report hit headquarters like a thunderbolt. From Master, MV Rockhampton to Comnav, Brisbane, subject, Convoy MS-9 AER, engaged by 18+ enemy aircraft. Expected total loss. However, dingo mounts, 6, proved decisive. Gunners expended esteemed 12,000 rounds in 4 minutes. Enemy attack broken. 5 kills confirmed. Ship unharmed. Request 6 more mounts and permanent allocation of ammunition." Japs did not like it. Repeat, did not like it. The phrase "Japs did not like it" became a legend on the docks. Commander Davies, now a fervent convert, was removed from his desk and put in charge of Operation Dingo, a high-priority ad hoc program to equip every single freighter heading north. The skepticism vanished, replaced by a frantic, typically Australian scramble to get it done. Dockyards in Townsville and Brisbane became 24-hour factories. The dingo mount was crude, but its crudeness was its genius. It required no specialized parts, no optical sights that took months to produce. It was built by shipyard welders and army mechanics using salvage. The design was iterated on the fly. Some got 50 caliber Browning machine guns salvaged from wrecked B-25 bombers. These super dingoes had even more stopping power. Some were hybrids, mixing two 50s for punch and two 303 Vickers for volume. Every ship leaving Australia became a Q ship, a surprise package. They'd sail with the dingo mounts hidden under tarpaulins. When the Japanese planes came in for their lazy, confident strafing runs, the tarps would be thrown off and the sky would explode. The Japanese pilots in Rabaul, who had ruled the skies for 2 years, were suddenly in a state of shock. Their milk runs had become lethal. A fictional but realistic translation of a captured Japanese pilot's diary from the 201st Kokutai Air Group at Rabaul in late 1943 read, "The Australian transports are no longer soft. They possess a new terrifying weapon. It is not like the Americans' Bofors, which is slow. This is a storm of fire appearing from nowhere. I lost my wingman Cano on what should have been an easy run. He flew into this wall and was torn apart. We are losing experienced pilots to these sheep. The transports have fangs. There is much anger. They are not playing fair." The hate was born. It was the deep, professional hatred of a predator whose prey had suddenly, impossibly, evolved. It was the hatred of the specialist, the samurai of the air, being brought down by a crude, ugly junkyard weapon manned by a farmer in a slouch hat. The Japanese were forced to change tactics. They stopped the low-level torpedo and strafing runs that had been so devastating. They were forced to bomb from high altitude, 15,000 feet or more, to stay out of the dingo's range. But high-altitude level bombing against a zigzagging ship was notoriously inaccurate. Bomb after bomb fell harmlessly into the sea, and the supplies got through, ammunition got through, fuel got through, food got through, and the men of the 7th and 9th Divisions got through. The dingo mount hadn't won the war, but it had plugged the leak. It had saved the New Guinea campaign. Lieutenant David Keenan, the mill manager, found himself promoted to lieutenant commander and summoned to Brisbane. He walked into General Blamey's office, terrified. Blamey didn't look up from his map. "Keenan, your invention is ugly, loud, and probably violates a dozen treaties. I love it." He finally looked up, his eyes sharp. "You've saved us more ships in 2 months than the whole Navy has in a year. You've given the diggers a fair go, and the Japs bloody hate you for it. Good work." The dingo mount was a starting point, not an end. Once it hit the fleet, the troops in the field, the sailors and diggers who used it every day, began to perfect it. On the MV Duntroon, a chief engineer, noticing how fast the Vickers gun barrels burned out, rigged a primitive water cooling system using the ship's fire hoses and nozzles from the galley, tripling the weapon's sustained firing time. On another ship, an Army signal sergeant, tired of the gunner captains yelling themselves hoarse over the din, jury-rigged an intercom system using salvaged field telephones. This allowed a central flak officer on the bridge to direct the fire of all 6 mounts simultaneously. "Aft port mount. 2 Kates 9 o'clock low. Put it all on the lead bird." This led to the dingo salvo. Instead of all guns firing wildly, they learned to focus their fire. A convoy commander would wait, letting the Japanese planes get inside the box. Then, on a single command, all 24 guns on his ship would open up at once, targeting a single aircraft. The effect was horrifying. The Japanese, in turn, were forced to adapt. Their high-altitude bombing was ineffective. Their low-level attacks were suicide, so they turned to the dark. They began washing machine Charlie raids, nighttime harassment runs, primarily using float planes or single bombers. They would circle the convoys, just out of range, dropping sporadic bombs to disrupt the crew's sleep and fray their nerves. The dingo mounts were less effective. They couldn't see their targets. The response was another piece of classic Australian improvisation. On the MV Kumpartu, Lieutenant Keenan, on an inspection tour, saw the problem. His solution? He borrowed 2 massive carbon arc searchlights from an Army coastal defense battery. The next night, when washing machine Charlie arrived, the dingoes stayed silent. The searchlights snapped on, catching a Japanese Jake float plane in their blinding white glare. The pilot, momentarily blinded, was a perfect illuminated target. Engage. 2 dingo mounts opened up, their tracers looking like neon spears in the night sky. They walked the streams of fire straight into the plane, which exploded in a brilliant orange fireball. The Japanese tried one more tactic: coordinated mass assault. They reasoned that 20 guns couldn't stop 40 planes. At the Battle of the Huon Gulf, they sent everything they had. It was a mistake. They forgot that the Dingoes weren't the convoy's only defense. They were just the last defense. The massed Japanese attack was met first by ARAF Kittyhawks and USAAF Lightnings, vectored in by Allied coast watchers. The formations were broken up. The survivors who made it through the fighter screen, already damaged and disorganized, then had to face the destroyer's 5-inch guns. And the handful that survived that, bleeding, desperate, then met the Dingoes. It was a layered defense, and Keenan's invention was the bloody razor-sharp edge at the center. The Japanese hate turned to despair. They could not stop the convoys. The supply line to New Guinea was now a one-way street, and it was pouring men and material north. Success was a heavy burden. The Dingo mount was not a magic wand. It was a tool, and like any tool in war, it had its own cruel arithmetic. The first cost was physical. The sound, the indescribable, deafening roar of 2,000 rounds per minute, was more than the human ear could take. The first gunners, like Private Harris, were effectively deafened after their first engagement. They stuffed their ears with cotton, with cloth, with spent shell casings. But it wasn't enough. A Dingo gunner was marked by his ringing ears and his tendency to shout in a quiet room. Many suffered permanent total hearing loss. The second cost was material. The Dingoes were heavy. Bolting 6 tons of scrap metal to the deck of an aging 30-year-old freighter had consequences. They popped rivets. They stressed hulls. In heavy seas, the ships handled badly, the top-heavy weight making them roll like pigs, as one captain put it. But the worst cost was tactical. Success bred overconfidence. Off the Trobriand Islands, 2140, November 2nd, 1943. Commander Davies, now in charge of convoy routing, had grown bold. The Dingoes were working too well. He had an urgent shipment of ammunition for the offensive at Finschhafen. The destroyer escorts were on another mission. "Send it," Davies ordered. "A fast freighter, the MV Mariba, unescorted. The Dingoes will protect her." It was a fatal miscalculation. The Dingo mount was an anti-aircraft weapon. It was never ever intended to fight a surface ship. At 2140, the Mariba's lookout spotted a shadow. It wasn't a plane. It was the Japanese submarine I-177. The sub surfaced, its 140mm deck gun barking in the night. The Dingo gunners, brave to a fault, ran to their mounts. They opened fire. Their .303 and .50 caliber rounds sparked and ricocheted harmlessly off the submarine's conning tower. It was like throwing pebbles at a tank. The I-177 took its time. Its deck gun punched shell after shell into the Mariba's waterline. The freighter didn't stand a chance. She sank in 8 minutes. When the news reached Keenan, he locked himself in his office. He looked at his blueprints, at the reports of 5 kills confirmed. He had helped create a defense, but he had also helped create an illusion of invincibility, and that illusion had just cost 40 men their lives. He was no longer just a mill manager. He was an ordnance officer. He was a man whose decisions, whose designs, had a direct, bloody consequence. He felt the weight of every rivet, every bullet, and every man lost. He went to Davies's office the next morning. "Sir," Keenan said, his voice flat, "the Dingo is a shield against the sky. It is not a sword. Never, never. Send a ship armed only with Dingoes. They need escorts. They will always need escorts." Davies, humbled and gray, looked at the sinking report. "Understood, Commander." The war had taught them another lesson, this one written in blood. The Dingoes were part of a system, not a replacement for it. By mid-1944, the tide in the Pacific had irrevocably turned. The massive Japanese base at Rabaul, once the hornet's nest that ruled the skies, was now a ghost. It wasn't invaded. It was bypassed, starved, isolated. The U.S. Navy and Air Force, along with the RAAF, had pounded it into impotence. And the supply lines that made this possible, they were flowing. The rust bucket convoys of 1943 had been replaced by a massive, efficient logistical machine. Newer, faster Liberty ships from American yards, protected by new destroyer escorts, and, for a time, the rugged, homegrown dingo mounts. The dingo's role was, by its own nature, temporary. As the Allies achieved total air supremacy, the threat of air attack diminished. As more proper 40mm Bofors guns became available from American factories, the crude, improvised dingoes were gradually replaced. They were cut off the decks, dumped back in the boneyards from whence they came. But they had served their purpose. They had bridged the gap. In the critical, desperate months of 1943, when the New Guinea campaign hung by a thread, the dingoes had held the line. They had saved the ships, saved the men, and delivered the cargo. The Japanese hatred for them was a testament to their effectiveness. They had ruined the Japanese strategy of interdiction. They had cost the Japanese Naval Air Force dozens, perhaps hundreds, of its most experienced pilots. Pilots who were irreplaceable. They had wasted them on lowly freighters. For his ingenuity, persistence, and contribution to the defense of Allied shipping, Lieutenant Commander David Keenan, RAN VR, was awarded the Member of the Order of the British Empire, MBE. It was a quiet, respectable medal, not a high-flying cross for valor. It was a medal for an engineer. At the small ceremony, Colonel Malone shook his hand. "They won't make a movie about you, Keenan," the colonel grunted. "They make movies about fighter pilots. But those pilots can't fly without fuel, and the diggers can't fight without bullets. You brought 'em the mail. That's what won this bloody war. Don't you forget it." Keenan looked at the small medal in its box. He thought of the noise. He thought of the Gundawindi and the Mariba. He thought of Private Harris, now working in a depot, permanently deaf. "I won't forget, sir," he said. "Bundaberg, Queensland, Australia, 1975. The Taldora sugar mill was humming. The air was sweet and sticky with the smell of molasses. David Davo Keenan, now in his late 60s, gray-haired and with a permanent stoop, watched the massive turbine spin. The sound, a deep mechanical roar, no longer bothered him. His hearing was mostly gone, a legacy of that first test fire on the MV Rockhampton. His MBE was in a drawer at home, next to his cufflinks. His son, a university student, had once asked him what it was for. "For welding," David had said. He was just a mill manager again. The war was a lifetime ago. History had largely forgotten the dingo mount. It was a footnote, an improvisation. The grand narratives focused on the carrier battles, Coral Sea, Midway, and the great generals, like MacArthur and Blamey. No one wrote books about a piece of scrap metal welded to a freighter's deck, but the men who were there, they remembered. Archival interview footage, Australian War Memorial, 1988. Interviewer: "Mr. Harris, you were a gunner on the Rockhampton in 1943. What was it like?" Thomas: "Tommy Harris, age 65, speaking very loudly. What was it like? It was bloody loud. That's what it was." He laughs, a wheezing sound. "We were diggers, see? Army. We'd never been on a ship. They put us on this thing that Lieutenant Keenan built. It was 4 Vickers on a post. Looked like a madman's dream." Interviewer: "Were you scared?" Harris: "Course we were. Scared stiff, until the first Jap plane came in. See, before that we were just targets. We were just sitting there waiting to die. The Japs knew it. They'd come in slow, waggling their wings, laughing at us." Interviewer: "And the dingo mount changed that?" Harris: His eyes change. The humor fades. "Changed it? Oh, mate. When I pressed that trigger, that noise, the power, I saw that zero, that ace, just come apart. We weren't sheep anymore. We had teeth, bloody big ones." Interviewer: "The Japanese pilots, reports say they..." Harris. He leans in close to the microphone, his voice dropping. "They hated us, you understand? They hated us more than they hated the Yanks or the destroyers, because we weren't supposed to fight back. We were just cargo, and we were beating them. We were spoiling their fun. We were making them pay for every bloody mile." Harris. He sits back, a small, proud smile on his face. "They hated those convoys, and every time we heard they hated us, we just welded on another gun. That's the Aussie way, mate. The harder you hit us, the spickier we get." Close up on David Keenan, 1975. He stands by the turbine. He adjusts his hearing aid. The roar of the mill fades to a low hum. He looks out the window, past the sugarcane fields, toward the sea. He hadn't just built a weapon. He had built a reply. He had taken the helplessness and frustration of a sinking nation and forged it into an instrument of defiance. It was crude. It was improvised. It was loud. And it was, for a desperate time, exactly what was needed. It was the sound of a fair go. And it had been enough.